right. Hey, we are finishing this series called Restart. We've been in it this is the fourth week. So started in the last week of July, and here we are in the last week of August. And it really is core to the Christian faith. And so if you're a follower of Jesus, you're a Christian here today, this series has been about reminding us of this really beautifully true aspect of the Christian faith. If you're maybe exploring faith, you're new to this whole thing, hopefully this will be a good snapshot of, hey, this is so important to our faith. And that is this idea that Jesus gives us restarts, man. He gives us fresh starts, even whenever we blow it, whenever we screw up. It's not just yes, Jesus makes you brand new whenever you first put your faith in him. He transforms you. The old is gone, the new is here, the new creation, the dead man that we were, and we're now alive, and all of that is true, but that's not just a one and done thing. There is an opportunity for a restart or a fresh start every day, every moment that we read in Scripture, that God's mercies are new every single day. That we read that no matter what we're going through, in the words of the Apostle Paul, that God's grace is enough for us in every moment. And so that's what this series has been about, that whenever we come up against sometimes personal failings or life happens to us and circumstances happen, and we can come to Jesus for what we need and the restart that we need. And so the series has been us looking at different people throughout Scripture who came to God in those kind of moments, and he gave them what they needed, that kind of fresh start. And so we started the series talking about King David, Israel's most famous king, and he was a warrior, and he was a poet, and he was known for many things and many successes, and he was known as a man after God's own heart. And then he completely just kind of went off the rails and had a massive moral failing. He committed adultery with a married woman. She got pregnant. He tries to cover it up by having her husband killed. It's just a disaster. And he's confronted in his sin. And he's forgiven. He turns back to God and receives that forgiveness. And while there were still consequences for what he had done, that wouldn't be the thing that would define him for the rest of his life. That we come to God in the same kind of manner that, we may fail and we may screw up, but it doesn't have to hang over you. It doesn't have to be the thing that defines you. He gives us a restart. Then we looked at the prophet Elijah, who God worked through in powerful ways and did all kinds of amazing things through. Probably the most famous, most prolific would be the showdown that Elijah had on a mountain with a bunch of false prophets, and God shows up and works through him, and it's amazing. And then after that, Elijah is just completely exhausted. And he basically is I'm done. I don't have anything left in me. I don't have another fight in me. I am done. Just please, I'm ready to die. And God meets him in that and says, Elijah, take a nap, have a snack. Really, that's in the Bible, so that's cool. Take a nap, have a snack, and then come and meet with me. Come be in my presence, Elijah. Come hear my voice. And whenever we feel overwhelmed, which is life a lot of times, God invites us into his presence, and he will provide what we need. Last week, then, we saw Jesus heal 2 blind men. Being blind meant there was no future for them. There was no hope. There was no help. There was nothing they could do to get out of their situation. And in their desperation, Jesus is walking by one day, and they call out to him, and Jesus stops and hears them and heals them. And in the same way, whenever we feel completely stuck, Jesus hears us when we call out to him. And so as we wrap things up today, we're going to look at one final person who was given this kind of fresh start from God. And the person we're going to look at today has been known as, or is known as, the Gerasene Demoniac, because he's from the region of the Gerasenes, and he is demon-possessed. And so we're going to look at Jesus healing a demon-possessed man today. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But before we even jump into that, let me just kind of address the whole idea of demonic possession, because us as very Western, very rationalistic, enlightenment thinking in terms of hey, everything's in the brain, everything spiritual is kind of weird for us. It can be something that we're what do we do with that? Let me just say a couple of things. Number one, it's okay to be uncomfortable by texts of Scripture. It should make us uncomfortable. Number two, if you're a Christian, listen, the foundation of our faith is that a guy came back from the dead, all right? And so if that's on the table, the supernatural is a real thing. And finally, there's a lot of conversations that can be had about what about what does demonic possession even mean? What does that look like? What did it look like then? Does that still happen now? Why does it seem like it happens some places and not other places? Those are all really fascinating conversations that we're not going to get into today. But what I do want us to recognize is that what I think we could hopefully all come to an agreement on, at least if you're a person of faith, is that spiritual evil is real. There are forces of evil and darkness in the world that are more than just human, and that destroy people. And that maybe you've had an experience with that or seen somebody with that. It's like, man, there is a darkness over them and messing with them and just in the world. And that is a very, very real thing. And so we see a man who, in this encounter with Jesus, he's possessed by demons, but there's this spiritual evil and darkness over him. And Jesus has power over the forces of spiritual evil. They are defeated. And so keep that in mind as we go through this and all the questions that it may raise. Mark chapter 5 is where we're going to be. So if you brought a Bible with you, Mark chapter 5. If you'd like a hard copy Bible to hold and flip through, you don't have them with you, there's some at the back of the room. I'm also going to have the verses up behind me. And so you can follow along there as well. We're just going to walk through 20 verses of Mark chapter 5. So starting in verse 1, we read this, that they came to the other side of the sea, to the region of the Gerasenes. And as soon as he got out of the boat, a man with an unclean spirit came out of the tombs and met him. Now, there's a couple of things going on here that are going to set up the rest of this account. And the first thing is Mark tells us where this happened. It says so that's Jesus and his disciples came to the other side of the sea. They crossed the sea to the region of the Gerasenes. Now, for us, it's like, okay, that's cool. That's a nice little geographic detail. What exactly does that mean? But there's theological significance to this region. The region of the Gerasenes is what would have been known as a Gentile area. So throughout the Old Testament into the New, in the time of Jesus, you have this idea of the Jews and the Gentiles. The Jewish people, the ethnic Jewish people, and the Gentiles. The Gentiles were just anybody who was not Jewish. And it's hard for us to imagine the kind of divide that existed between Jews and Gentiles, the kind of animosity that existed between them. And so much of what we read in the New Testament is actually shaped and colored by that. These two groups of people that through Jesus, God is actually trying to bring together and make one new humanity in him. But in the Old Testament, the Jews are kind of God's chosen people. And they certainly were, but what they lost sight of at the time of Jesus, many of them had lost sight of the fact that they were chosen for a purpose. They weren't God's chosen people because God's like, I just like you better than everybody else, or somehow you've earned this or deserve this. In fact, the whole Old Testament is basically one big story of how like the Jewish people didn't earn it and didn't deserve it, and they kept messing up. But God chose them for a purpose. That when he first began to fix what went wrong with sin in the world, he calls a man named Abraham in Genesis chapter 12 and says, I'm going to make you into a great nation. Your family's going to become a nation, and that's where the Jewish people would come from. And all the nations of the world will be blessed through you. Like, it's not just about you, it's about what will happen through you. And then we read in the prophets that all the nations would come to Jerusalem to worship God. We read that a light would shine to the Gentiles, pointing in this direction that through the Jewish people, the Messiah would come. And Jesus shows up, and it's that moment, it's that point in time. It's him doing something for all of humanity. He came through the Jewish people to be the Savior of the entire world. And so when Mark lets us know, hey, they came to the region of the Gerasenes, like this is a deliberate step by Jesus into Gentile territory, into an area and a people group that many would have seen as, you don't go there. Those people don't matter. God couldn't love those people. We're God's favorites. They're not. And Jesus shows up and says, nope, I'm going to them. Now, for sure, most of Jesus' ministry was to the Jewish people. It would be later through his disciples. He said, now go tell the whole world. But there were these moments in the ministry of Jesus where even he would be reaching out to the Gentiles. And this is one of the really, really big ones. And so we're given a picture of this demon-possessed man that he is an outsider of outsiders. He is on the outside of society and also on the outside of the religious system, being able to connect with God, being able to worship God. And there's a few more things that point to this as well. Number one, it's the region. So the region of the Gerasenes, it's a Gentile area. A little bit later in the account, we're going to hear about pigs. And pigs to the Jewish people are unclean. They are not kosher. They don't fit into their dietary restrictions. And so the fact that there's pigs in the story, pigs in the land, it's like, ew, like get away from the pigs. It's not good. It's unclean there. We read that he has an unclean spirit that's described as he's not just possessed by a demon, but he's unclean. He's separated from God. He can't be near God. And he came out of the tombs to meet him. So number one, living among the tombs indicated that he was socially ostracized because of his condition. From his own people, he was cut off. But again, to the Jewish audience, a tomb or a graveyard was an area that was unclean. The Jewish people couldn't touch a dead body or a grave because you would get the unclean cooties on you, basically. It's like if you touch that, now you're unclean, and you have to isolate, and you have to go through the ceremonial process of becoming clean again. And so they just completely stayed away from that. It's been a picture of a guy who has an unclean spirit living in an unclean place from an unclean people. Like he is the outsider of outsiders. He's outside with the Jewish religion, but he's also, because of his possession, outside of his own people. He is isolated and alone. And this is the man who rushes out to meet Jesus. Verse 3 tells us that he lived in the tombs, and no one was able to restrain him anymore, not even with a chain. Because he often, sorry, you guys know how my brain works, or maybe you don't, but you're going to find out. So this is the millennial in me. Whenever I read not even with a chain, I just want to yell, is that a chain? Anybody? Nobody. Nobody? Wow. I quit. I'm going home. But not even with a chain, he could. That's right. I'm an outsider. I feel so. He had often been bound with shackles and chains, but he had torn the chains apart and smashed the shackles, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. And so we're given this picture, right? There's something wrong with this guy. Everybody knows there's something wrong with this guy, and everybody tried to fix him in his community. Right, it's clear that he was broken. He's got this demonic possession. However, that's manifesting itself. It's probably bothering the people, I would imagine, as we see kind of his behavior. He's naked and alone and screaming and like cutting himself, as we're going to get to. But people tried to fix it. Maybe if we can put some chains on this guy, some shackles on this guy, we can sit him down, we can lock him up. He'll appear normal enough to be able to kind of get himself worked into society, and he'll be acceptable to us. We will fix him. We will fix him. And it's interesting, while we don't actually go around chaining people up anymore, hope not, we still do a similar thing when it comes to our brokenness. We may not be broken in the way that this guy is broken, but all of us are broken in some way. We are all sinful. We are all broken. We all fall short. We all have stuff. I mean, just the stuff that we know, like, why do I do that? Why do I think that? I hate that. I hate that my mind goes. Did I think that way? I hate that I feel this way. Like there is just a brokenness about humanity in all of us, whether put upon by ourselves or even culture around us. Try to find ways to fix our own brokenness. To put some chains on and think, okay, this works for a little while. This soothed me for a little while. I seem okay for a little while. Again, whether that's self-medication, sometimes, let me numb the pain, let me ignore the pain, let me do whatever. We kind of put these chains on ourselves, or the pressure, again, from the world around us to say, you're broken, here's what will make you happy. Go buy that, go do that, go smoke that, go drink that, go sleep with that person. Go kind of make it all better. Make it all better. Pursue you. And it would seem as though that this actually worked for a little while, because it says that no one was able to restrain him anymore. At one point, it may have worked. And man, isn't that true? Sometimes we try to fix ourselves, we try to numb ourselves, we try to do the things. It works for a little while. I got a week out of it, or a month, or a couple years, and then all of a sudden it's roaring right back, and I need more, or it's just not working anymore. And so he's broken the chains, he's torn off the shackles. And so night and day then, since no one could subdue him anymore, he couldn't be among the people, he was out among the tombs and on the mountains. The tombs and the mountains. And he was crying out, and he was cutting himself with stones. He goes to a place that is completely isolated. And in Luke's recording of this, because Luke records this account as well, he really spells it out for us so when there's no confusion about tombs and mountains. Luke says in his gospel, chapter 8, verse 29, he had broken his chains and been driven by the demon into solitary places. Whatever was going on in this guy's life caused him to go and isolate himself. So we see he's going out and he's cutting himself with stones, and he's out in isolation. Self-destruction and isolation. Those are two of the oldest weapons, tools of the enemy. Get you alone and get you into habits and patterns that just blow yourself up. And they become a vicious cycle, if you've ever been there. Do some things to try to feel better that I know isn't good for me, that I know is destroying myself, that I know isn't right or is even frowned upon. And then I feel this immense weight of shame and guilt, and so I can't tell anybody, I can't show anybody, I need to be alone. And then I need to soothe again, and then I can't show anybody, I can't tell anybody, I need to be alone. I'm telling you that these destructive habits and isolation are one of the biggest tools that the enemy uses, and he has used for so long Don't let people know. Don't let people in. And so here is this man. People have tried to fix him. He's probably tried to fix himself, and now he's just been like, okay, this is my life now. Out among the tombs, yelling and screaming until he dies. But Jesus shows up. Verse 6 says, when he sees Jesus from a distance, he ran and knelt down before him. Now, we don't know how he recognizes that this is Jesus. Jesus' fame had been kind of spreading at this point. People knew about Jesus. It's starting to word is starting to get around. And so I don't know if he heard or he could see or somebody came and told him, whatever it looks like, or maybe he just knew and he runs to Jesus. And he runs to Jesus, but then what's interesting is the voice that speaks is not from his perspective. It's actually from the demon within him. He says, what do you have to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you before God, don't torment me. For he had told him, come out of the man, you unclean spirit. The demons recognized instantly who he is. I think that's one of the fascinating things you read through accounts in the gospel is that a lot of times people in the gospels they're divided or confused about who's Jesus. We disagree about that. I think he's the Messiah. I don't think he is. I think he's a prophet. I think he's a false prophet. Like he's bad. He's good. Whatever. But the spiritual forces of evil are never confused about Jesus. Like when he shows up, they're like, oh, we know who he is, and this is not good for us that he's here. And so it's just like, as soon as Jesus shows up, the man's like, I need you. And the demon's like, uh-oh, this is not good. This is not good. Please don't torment me. As he tells him to come out. And then Jesus asks him an interesting question. I don't know if he's just being polite or what. Because he's like, hey, what's your name? What's your name? My name is Legion, he answered him, because we are many. This picture that we get then is it's not like this guy just has a little issue. He's got a massive issue. He's got an army of issues. He's got a multitude of issues. And he begged him earnestly not to send him out of the region. A large herd of pigs was there feeding on the hillside. And the demons begged him, send us to the pigs so that we may enter them. And so he gave them permission. And the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs. And the herd of about 2,000 rushed down the steep bank and into the sea and drowned there. Y'all, this is a weird story. Like, this is one of those things that, like, when I'm with Jesus one day, I'm like, okay, so what was up with the pigs? Like, I really just, what is going on? I don't know, but like this impressive thing happens. What's interesting is sometimes we'll focus on the pigs, like I just did right there, and lose sight of the man who's been restored. And that's what's going to happen with the people in this region as well. The men who tended them ran off and reported it in the town and the countryside, and the people went to see what had happened. And they came to Jesus, and they saw the man who had been demon-possessed, so they know who this guy is. He's sitting there, dressed and in his right mind. He's not naked and crazy anymore. And they were afraid. They were afraid. Like, what kind of power is this? What kind of man is this that has showed up? Who is this guy that completely changed him? But then, those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told them about the pigs. And they began to beg him to leave their region. They're like, okay, it's cool. Like, he's not naked and he's not crazy anymore. But the pigs, bro, did you hear about the pigs? And they're all like, you got to leave, Jesus. You crossed the line with the pigs. All right? I don't know if it's like they were really, is it they're afraid of everything that he'd done? Are they upset because, 2,000 pigs, that's a massive loss to a region and to an area economically, food sourcing, all of that kind of stuff. But I think it's just important that we pay attention to this, because how easy is it for us to lose sight of what God is doing in somebody's life so we can nitpick at something else? Hey, God's doing, did you see what God did in that life? Yeah, but they're still dealing with this over here. Or you see what God did in that person's life? Yeah, but how much did it cost? Or whatever it is, it's like we lose sight of, if God is moving in someone's life, let's keep the main thing the main thing. And so they began to beg him to leave the region, like, you got to get out of here, get out of here. Now, that doesn't mean that Jesus is done in this area. In fact, we're going to see that he's continuing to work and to move in this area, in this region. They ask Jesus to leave, right? But what of the demon-possessed man? As that's Jesus, was into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed. It's just so cool to read about like the past tense now. It's like it just happened. He's like, yep, not me anymore. That's who I used to be. It's not who I am now. Who had been demon-possessed, begged him earnestly that he might remain with him. As one would, right? You have your life completely changed by Jesus. Can I please go with you? I just want to go everywhere that you go. In fact, if you were here last week, we looked at when Jesus healed these two blind men, and it says immediately they got up and followed him. But not with this guy. Jesus didn't let him. Jesus didn't let him. Like, that's so weird. Why did you let the two blind guys follow you and not this guy? What's the deal? And I think it's because even when it doesn't make sense to us, Jesus knows what we need more than we know what we need. And he knew what this man needed more than this man thought he knew what he needed. And so Jesus tells him, here's what you really need. You need to go home to your own people and report to them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. She said, it's great, and yeah, you're going to be part of my crew, you're going to be part of my group, I've changed you, that's awesome, but right now I want you to go do something else. This man didn't just deal with, like the spiritual sickness, the demon possession. He wasn't just spiritually broken. He certainly was, but his spiritual brokenness led to relational brokenness. It led to isolation. And so Jesus doesn't just want to restore him spiritually, but also relationally and communally. He wants to have him integrated back into his community. And this is such a big, big deal, especially in that culture. It's hard for us because we live in an individualistic world and society. But in this ancient culture, in fact, most cultures throughout history and many around the world today, the focus is not on the individual. The focus is on the community. You did what was best for the community. You lived in community. You could only survive in community. You found your identity in your community, your security in your community. You fought for your community. You put your community first. Like everything was about the people that you belonged to. And that the individual found their place within the context of community. We kind of flip that and say, I'm an individual first, and let me find a community that my individualness can fit into. But it was all about this community. Your own home and your own people. You have a people that you belong to, and I want you to go to them. Jesus wanted to restore the man to this community because he knew how much he needed this community, but he also knew how much the community needed this man because this community needed the gospel, and they would only hear it from one of their own. They would hear it from one who they saw, wait, you were crazy and naked and out in the tombs, and you were demon-possessed, and now here you are. How did that happen? And it would be an opportunity for this man to share with them about what Jesus had done. This community needed the man, and this man needed his community. And that is one of the most countercultural things that we could possibly live into and do today, is to come to this place that says, I need community, and community actually needs me. There's a place that I belong and a place that needs what I bring to the table, because everything, even though we're super connected, everything drives us towards individualism. As much as we want to be individuals, say, I'm my own person, and I made my own way, and I got this, and I don't need anybody, and I'm looking out for number one, and I'm a strong, independent person. We weren't made for that. We were made to be in community, two places. Number one, in community with God and in community with other people around us, that we thrive in that environment when we're in relationship to God and to his people, and we actually wither whenever we are pulled out of that. We look around at our kind of culture, and this is a decades-long trend that's been exponentially increasing as time goes on, as we lean more and more into expressive individualism and less away from the community around us. Things are getting worse and worse. Externally, internally, as we lean more into expressive individualism, there's a lot more division and anger and tribalism. There's a lot more selfishness, consumerism, and materialism. There's a lot more isolation and loneliness, anxiety and depression, purposelessness, hopelessness. And we're told the answer then is to look deeper within yourself and to become even more of an individual, but that's not the answer at all. The answer is for us to look beyond ourselves to the person of Jesus, and to look to him to then restore us spiritually as this man was, and also communally as this man was, to be restored to our God and to a people. Jesus wanted this man to be restored and supported by the community, and wanted the community to be encouraged and transformed by the testimony of the man. And so he says, no, it's great that you want to come with me, but I have a different assignment for you right now. I want you to go home to your own people and tell them what I've done for you. Verse 20 says, so that's exactly what the man did. He went out and began to proclaim in the Decapolis. So the Decapolis, it wouldn't have just been the one place that he was from. The Decapolis was an entire Gentile region made up of these 10 kind of city-states. So that's where the prefix Decapolis. So these 10 different city-states. There was this whole Gentile region, and so this man went through the entire region telling them how much Jesus had done for him, and they were all amazed. They were amazed to hear about who this Jesus was. He takes Jesus at his word and he just goes, okay, you've changed me. You've told me to go to my own people. I'm going to my own people. He takes him at his word. That is quite a pattern that emerges in the Gospels when Jesus changes someone's life. So many times the first thing we see, they get up and they go, okay, who am I going to go tell? Jesus changed me. I can't keep quiet about that. I got to tell people about that. Because it's not just that he changed me. I want him to change everybody around me. I want him to bring hope to everybody around me. And they get up and Jesus changed their lives, so they get up and they tell everybody. And I read that in the Gospels. And I go, why don't we do that? We're like, Jesus changed me. Cool, I'll be quiet about it and I'll see you next Sunday at church. Instead of Jesus changed me and I can't shut up about it. Just something to think about. Takes Jesus at his word and he goes. Before Jesus shows up, we have this man who is ostracized from God. He's separated from God. He's separated from community. He's in this place of isolation and brokenness, and no one can get near him. Nobody wants to be near him. Nobody wants anything to do with him. Everybody tried to fix him. He's a lost cause, and Jesus shows up and says, come here. Come here. And Jesus wanted this man to belong, to be restored, and he wants that for us too. To have that sense of healing and belonging. And honestly, you can find a sense of belonging in a lot of different places. I'm not saying that the only place you'll ever find belonging is, in God and in his people. You can find a sense of belonging in sports or work or music or political tribes or family. And some of those things, they can be good. But the deepest sense of healing and belonging is found in the person of Jesus in the community that he has called to himself. That is where we truly begin to realize who we are and who he's made us to be and what he has for us. To be restored both spiritually and communally, to be in relationship with Jesus and with other people. That is the invitation for all of us. Come into relationship with our Creator that's been separated through our sin, but Jesus offers us a way back. Come into relationship with other people who will walk through this life with you and encourage you and follow Jesus together and pursue him together and pray for each other and cry with each other and celebrate with each other, to be restored to both Jesus and to his people. But it starts with that relationship with Jesus, right? This demon-possessed man, he didn't show up to Jesus and Jesus go, okay, go back to your people still naked and crazy. He's like, no, he healed him first and said, now go tell people what I've done. That there is a massive change in this man's story that is a change that is there for all of us if we so desire it. To trust in Jesus, to say, I am broken and I've got junk going on in me and other people have tried to fix it and I've tried to fix it and I just need Jesus. This is the good news of the gospel, that while we are broken and sinful, messed up people, God became man because he did not want that separation to exist between us. He did not want that brokenness to continue. God became man in the person of Jesus, died on a cross for our sin and for the evil in the world. To defeat evil and sin once and for all, he rose from the dead. And Scripture says that anyone who calls upon his name will be saved. If you confess with your mouth and believe in your heart that Jesus is Lord, you will be forgiven and you will be saved. And that ultimately is what this picture with the demoniac is about. It is pointing forward to what would happen at the end of Mark's gospel. Tom Wright says this in his commentary on the Gospel of Mark. He says, again, Mark is telling us to look at the bigger story. It's not just about what's happened with this demon-possessed man. Look at the bigger story. At the climax of Mark's story, Jesus himself will end up naked, isolated, outside of the town among the tombs, shouting incomprehensible things as he is torn apart on the cross by the standard Roman torture. His flesh torn to ribbons by the small stones in the Roman lash. And that, Mark is saying, will be how the demons are dealt with. That is how healing takes place. That Jesus is coming to share the plight of the people, to let the enemy do its worst to him, to take the full force of evil on himself and let others go free. To be in relationship with God because of what Jesus has done on our behalf. And then once we're in relationship with Jesus, he says, hey, it's not just about you and me and you go do your own little Christian thing over there. It's about you and me and all of your brothers and sisters in Christ as well. To be in relationship with other people, this thing called the church. The church. You read through the New Testament, you will find no other group of people where God says, here is where you find your faith community. Here is where you find your encouragement. Here is where you do all the one anothering than within his body called the church. It's within your local church that you find hope and healing and faith when you don't have it, and prayer and people to walk with you through highs and lows and laughter and tears and all of it. And all of it. And so, man, my challenge to you would be, if you call Hope Community your church, know your church. Be involved with your church. Like, know the people around you. Get to know some people and lean into those relationships. If you're just visiting, you got another church somewhere, that's fine, man. Like, get connected there. But don't just come and sit and listen, but know and be known. And that does not mean you need to be known by everybody. You can't do it, right? If everybody in the church was supposed to know everybody else, you'd only ever have a church that's like 10 to 15 people, because you can only know so many people. But you don't have to be known by everyone, but you do need to be known by someone, and vice versa. Come back next week. Actually, we're going to talk about this for a few weeks, this idea of friendship. Just what does biblical friendship look like and relationship look like? Because we are really, really bad as a culture now at friending. Like, of all the different relationships that exist, it's like we've forgotten just how to be friends with people. And so we're going to look at that. I'm going to encourage you, if this step is right for you, to get into a community group where people can know you. You can sign up on our website today. But get into that community. The second thing is this. Not only once we're saved and redeemed do we come into a community, are we restored to community, but we are sent out on mission to do the same for others. First thing he tells the man, okay, great, you're healed, you're restored. Go to your own home and to your own people and start telling the people around you what God has done for you. Like, he's done something for you. He's changed you. He's transformed you. You don't get to go be quiet about it now. It's not just a professional Christian's job like me to tell people about Jesus. It's on every single one of us that call ourselves a follower of Jesus. That Jesus has done something in you. Now you go share it with the world. And it doesn't mean it's got to be some big ornate, like I got this whole, defense of the gospel and all the points. In fact, it's really beautiful. The Apostle Peter writes in one of his letters, he just says, always be prepared to give a reason for the hope that you have. Why do you have hope? Why does Jesus give you hope? Be prepared to just tell people that. And he says, oh yeah, and by the way, and do it with all kindness, humility, and gentleness. So we don't go around like jamming Jesus down people's throat. We just live in such a way that is different, and people that take notice, and we go, you know why I live the way I do? You know why I have so much contentment? You know why I have so much peace and so much hope? You know why I'm changed? It's because of this guy named Jesus. And I think that the shocking part, we think if we tell people that, they're going to be like, oh, they're so mad and they hate me. And they're like, you get out of here with that Jesus stuff. And they start throwing things at us. That will rarely ever be the response that you get. Most people go, oh, okay, tell me about that. And if they don't want anything to do that, that's cool. I'm glad that works for you. But that's where your responsibility ends. You just tell people about Jesus. It's not your responsibility to convince anybody. It's not your responsibility to try to make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. Like, hey, here's what Jesus has done for me. He can do it for you. And just tell people. We're to be on the lookout like Jesus was on the lookout for this demon-possessed man. The person who is so on the outside, everyone has cast off, everyone says they're a lost cause, there's so much brokenness, there's so much pain, and sometimes that's visible, like it looks like the person is an outsider. Sometimes it's a person right in the middle, but inside it's like, I am a mess and I'm an outsider. Jesus says, be on the lookout for those kind of people and see them restored to God and to a community who can surround them. We've been talking over the past couple of months as we unrolled this vision earlier in the year, that our vision, what we feel like God is calling us to, is to see 500 lives transformed in the next 5 years. 5 years, 500 lives transformed by Jesus and for Jesus. It's by him. We can't do anything, but we can point people to the one who can. And it's not about us and our glory, it's about his. It's by Jesus and it's for Jesus. This is how it happens. One by one, we say, hey, here's what Jesus has done in me. Would you like to experience healing and hope and transformation? Because if he did it for me, he can do it for you. Some of you were here a couple of weeks back when we celebrated that through baptism and New Life Sunday. It was incredible. We baptized 12 people. All right, 488 to go. Let's go. I can do that math. All right, I got that. And it happens one at a time. One person going back to their own home and their own people and saying, here's what the Lord has done for me. You know what's crazy is sometimes it's hard to see because we're spread out across 2 services and with schedules. Some people will miss a week and they'll be gone for 2 weeks. We're a church of like 100 to 150 people. If each of us would go out this year and say, you know what, there's going to be one person that I'm going to tell what Jesus has done for me, and they're going to come to Jesus. Next year, that's like 200 or 300. The year after that, it's like 4 or 6, and then 8 or 12. You know what I'm saying? I can't keep doing that math. It's just too much. But that's how it works. That's how the gospel has spread for 2,000 years. That's how people like this demon-possessed man have been given hope and healing in a future for 2,000 years because one person said, hey, Jesus changed me and he can do it for you too. Be restored to God and restored to a community of people that will be with you no matter what. That's what you're invited into, and that's what you're invited to participate in. To belong to Jesus, to belong to his people, invite other people into it. Let me pray for us. Lord, I thank you that you are the God who sees us in our brokenness, in our pain, in our hurt. Lord, you see us when we're in those situations and positions, whether something life happened to us or it's our own sin, it's our own stupid mistakes. We find ourselves in those situations where nothing can fix it. Nobody else can fix us and we can't fix ourselves, but you see us in there and you can. And in your mercy, you came down from heaven. You died on a cross. You rose from the dead so that we can have hope in you, that we can be set free, that we can be forgiven, that we can be healed. Lord, I pray that we would know that that is possible today. I pray we would live like that is possible today. God, I pray that we would be restored to you and to your people, and that we would invite other people into that. We don't want to just sit and consume religious content. We want to be on mission with you. We want to see your good news transform our families and our workplaces and our communities and our schools. God, would you use us to invite others into the story that you're telling? Amen.